Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, welcome. My name is Jazzy, and today I'm going to share with you guys my reading stats for 2023. If you've been here before, if you've watched any of my other videos that I posted at the end of 23, you know that I have read 117 books, which feels really crazy, but I did collect stats as well as I could on all 117 of those books. So we're going to talk a little bit about the stats I tracked, a little bit about what they mean to me, what I'm going to do differently in the future, and what I hope to get out of reading stats in 2024 based off of what I've learned here in 2023. The calligraph pens, the binder clips, and the washi tape that I use in this setup are from the September 2023 Archer and Olive subscription box, which is by far one of my absolute favorite top 3 A&O subscription boxes of all time. I'm not sponsored. I just really like their products and I really like the designs of that particular box. And the stats that I chose are not very long. This isn't a whole deposition of 1,000,001 things that I can extract from a book. I wanted to keep it simple because this was my first time keeping stats on the books that I read. This was my first time tracking different aspects of books and authors as I read throughout the year. Because this is not inherently a bookish channel, I'm not trying to avoid the bookish hashtags or booktube or whatever. This channel is, though, very much focused on the journal aspect of my life. So even when it comes to reading and talking about books, I'm not going to go too much into depth about the books that I actually read in this video. If you guys want that, let me know in the comments. Maybe I'll do a video about books that I read, talk a little bit more in depth about the books, but I'm mostly interested in making videos about how I use my journal and how I create intersectionality with hobbies and tasks and responsibilities with my daily journal. So the longest book I read in 2023 was Winter by Marissa Meyer. This is the 4th book in the Lunar Chronicles, which I accidentally read the series. I wasn't intending on reading the series, but it is a collection of fairy tale retellings, which is my absolute favorite. You'll probably hear that more than once. And the shortest book that I read was Galatea by Madeline Miller, which I just wanted to know what was all the hype about the author of the Song of Achilles, and so I picked that one up and I enjoyed it. I thought it was a nice little short book. It's also very interesting to me that the shortest and longest book authors both have MM initials. My least favorite book of the year, Out of Darkness. I just don't like it. It's just bad. My favorite book of the year, By the Book by Jasmine Guillory. I, as I just mentioned, love a good fairy tale retelling, and especially if the main character is a Black woman, there's so many similarities in the main character and me. And I just really, really love that book. So moving on to the stats, there are 4 that I chose to track here. This first one is going to be format. So the pie chart represents the different books that I read, or the different formats of books that I read throughout the year. Like I said, in total, I read 117 books. 9 of them were physical copies. 14 of them were ebooks. And the other 94 were audiobooks. Now, that is obvious to me. It makes sense to me that I was always going to read more audiobooks than anything else. Number one, because I travel for work. I'm always on the road. I'm always in airports. I'm always driving in a car somewhere for hours at a time. And it's just a really good way to pass the time, a really good way to stay awake and alert, but also be engaged and kind of transported maybe out of my immediate reality for a little bit. And I definitely believe that if I hadn't have read this many audiobooks, well, I mean, aside from, the natural fact that if I didn't read as many audiobooks, I wouldn't have read as many books, period. Also, I wouldn't have read anywhere near 117 books. If I had to read every single book in physical form, I would probably barely get through 12 books in a year. I do not like reading physical books. I do not like holding a book in my hand. I do not like paper. I do not like turning pages. It's not a texture thing. It's not really a time thing. It's just a matter of I don't want to do it this way. And I do believe that there are some books that are much better read in physical form. Like there are a few of the audiobooks that I read this year that I thought, man, I probably would have gotten more out of this if I had read the physical version, but I'm not gonna because I just don't want to. So those are the stats for that. I wanted to track that because I knew I read a lot more audiobooks, but I really just wanted to see at the end of the year how many physical books I would actually decide to read and how many ebooks would sporadically be thrown in there, because I also don't have an e-reader. It's just my phone that I read ebooks on, and I am somebody who gets incredibly distracted. Like if it's 4:00 and I realize, oh my goodness, the sun is up, I will stop reading a book and go scroll and shop and then leave the house and go do 100 things before I remember that I was reading a book. So I just wanted to see how many of those made it in there. Not surprised by audiobooks. In 2024, probably not a stat that I'm necessarily going to track because I'm still going to continue to travel for work and I still love audiobooks. So maybe I'll track it, maybe I won't. We'll see. This next chart below here, which I lost some of the footage for as I was making some of it, but these are the books and pages per month. Now, this is where I probably got the most insight about the way I decided to track these stats and the way, and the stats that I decided to track in general. So I use Goodreads, and I didn't realize until the end of the year that I could have picked the audiobook edition to track in Goodreads instead of the first edition that came up when I searched for the books. Now, searching for the book gave me the number of pages for whatever that initial edition was. Unfortunately, I didn't read those pages. So that is helpful, but not really, because most of those pages were actually just minutes and hours, and I cannot be bothered with converting the minutes and hours because it's also not a one-to-one conversion. Audiobooks play by default at 1x speed. I speed them up. I do not read any audiobook slower than 1.5x speed. Some books I have read at 1.75 or 1.85 times the speed. So then doing more math on top of that just wasn't going to work out. This is definitely a stat that I would like to keep track of, but instead of waiting till the end of the year to try to figure out math and realize that I've made a really big mistake in counting all of these pages for no real benefit to me, I'm going to track these on a monthly basis. That way, each month I can count hours easily, count pages easily, depending on what books I've read via audiobook, via physical book, or via ebook. So that's something I learned. Another thing I learned in this is that the stats that I picked are very simple. I thought they were simple, but the more I read and the more I tried to distinguish some of these details, the more I realized I don't know how helpful it is. I didn't start the year off with any goal to specifically read more of a certain type of author, more books from a certain country, more books written in an original different language. And so not having a goal, obviously, it makes sense to me that I don't feel fulfilled, or there's not a message or a point to the end of this, except that there is a really, really fun dynamic of looking at the genres. So the chart that you see now are the genres that I read. Obviously, maybe not obviously. Obviously, to me, I am not surprised. Fantasy is number one. I read more fantasy books than any other genre. I love fantasy. It's my favorite genre of all time. I definitely will continue to track this in 2024 just to see how my preferences change. Do I think I'm gonna like anything more than fantasy? Probably not, but it'll be fun to see on a monthly basis. Again, monthly versus waiting for the whole year at the end of the year. It'll be fun on a monthly basis to see what I'm leaning towards as the year goes on. Something I'm going to do differently in 2024 is track the books that I read and some stats in Storygraph instead of Goodreads. If you're not familiar with Storygraph, it is a pretty simple platform, in my opinion. As far as I know, as far as the books that I've read so far this year, they are all in the catalog on Storygraph. And something interesting that the platform does is, in addition to tracking audiobooks and hardcover editions and all the different editions of a book, for audiobooks specifically, it also tracks the minutes and hours read, and it also tracks things like mood and pacing of a book, in addition to basic things like genre and language. Now, in my opinion, mood and pacing are kind of subjective, and I don't really know how important pacing will be to me. I think it might be interesting to see on a monthly basis and then cumulatively at the end of the year what type of books I lean more towards. Are they books that have fast pacing, mid pacing, or that are slow paced? But I think in general, I don't really care as long as it's a good story and as long as there are fun, interesting characters. But that'll still be interesting to see. And then mood, I don't inherently mood read. I just kind of read whatever's next. And partly because I rent a lot of books from my library. I use Libby. Most of the books I read on Libby. So when I check out a book, I have it for 2 weeks, and most of the books I check out are pretty popular audiobooks. So I don't get to extend the loan past the 2 weeks that I have it. So I don't really mood read. I just kind of read whatever is available to me or whatever I have added to my TBR that's now coming up to the front of the holds that I have at the library. So that'll be interesting to see, even when it's kind of out of my control, or not really out of my control, but I've given some of that control away by reading through Libby. It'll be interesting to see in Storygraph what moods I tend to lean towards and what kind of feelings I tend to enjoy and really look forward to when I'm reading a book. If you've made it this far in the video, thank you so much for staying with me. If you haven't yet, be sure to subscribe to the channel and press the bell icon so you can get notifications for when new videos are coming out. If you haven't yet, be sure to like the video. That's the only way I know if you actually like it. And be sure to comment what you like about it, what you're looking forward to, what platforms and tools you use if you are tracking stats for the books you read, and what you would be interested in seeing more of on this channel. As of right now, I don't really have any plans, no concrete plans anyway, to turn this more into a book channel. I like journaling. I like showing my journal. I like getting different ideas from different creators and commenters and internet users in general. And I really want that to be the focus of this channel. But if you guys are interested in more of a dissection of the books that I am reading and want to hear more about the details of why I like the books I like and why I don't like the books I like and the tropes and the authors and things like that, we can definitely talk about that. I'm not opposed to talking more about books. It's just that I love talking more about my journal. So let me know down in the comments below if that's something you're interested in as well. And that brings us to the end of this setup for my 2023 reading stats. I hope you guys enjoyed this. Thanks so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.